What happens when one of Hollywood's most enigmatic stars finds himself cornered on live television, facing questions that cut deeper than any script he's ever read? Today we're diving into the explosive moment that had viewers across the nation glued to their screens, watching as Johnny Depp's composure cracked in real time during what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop your thoughts in the comments below, because what you're about to hear will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about celebrity interviews. The Today with Jenna and Friends show was buzzing with its usual morning energy when Johnny Depp walked onto the set. The atmosphere seemed relaxed, almost casual, as he settled into the plush interview chair across from host Jenna Martinez and her co-hosts, Sarah Chen and Marcus Rodriguez. What none of the viewers at home could have predicted was that this seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning would become one of the most talked about television moments of the year. Jenna opened with her trademark warm smile. "Johnny, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Your fans are absolutely thrilled about your upcoming projects." Johnny leaned back slightly, his hands resting on the chair arms. "Always a pleasure, Jenna, though I have to say, your green room coffee is something else entirely." The audience chuckled, and Sarah jumped in with what seemed like an innocent follow-up. "Speaking of projects, there's been quite a bit of speculation about your return to major studio films. How does it feel to be back in Hollywood's good graces?" The question hung in the air for just a moment too long. Johnny's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, his jaw tightening just enough for the cameras to catch it. "Good graces," he repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. "That's an interesting way to put it, Sarah." Marcus, sensing the slight tension, attempted to steer the conversation. "What Johnny means is that talent always finds its way back to where it belongs, right?" But Johnny wasn't having it. He turned his attention fully to Sarah, his voice taking on an edge that made the studio audience shift uncomfortably in their seats. "No, Marcus, that's not what I mean at all. Sarah asked a very specific question about good graces, and I think we should explore that a bit more. Don't you think?" Jenna's media training kicked in as she tried to smooth things over. "Well, we're just excited to have you here promoting your new independent film. The early reviews have been absolutely incredible." "Incredible," Johnny echoed, but there was no warmth in his repetition. "You know what I find incredible? The way certain narratives get spun in this industry. The way people can sit across from you, smiling, while simultaneously perpetuating the very myths that nearly destroyed your career." The studio fell silent except for the quiet hum of the cameras. Sarah's face flushed slightly, but she maintained her professional composure. "Johnny, I think there might be a misunderstanding here. Is there?" Johnny leaned forward now, his intense gaze fixed on the hosts. "Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you've already decided what story you want to tell about my so-called return to good graces. As if I was ever out of them in the first place." Marcus cleared his throat. "Look, Johnny, we're all friends here. We're on your side." Johnny's laugh was sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Friends, Marcus? Friends don't ambush each other on live television. Friends don't pretend that 6 years of character assassination never happened, while simultaneously validating the premise of that assassination." Jenna tried once more to regain control. "Johnny, we absolutely respect everything you've been through, and we're here to talk about your art, your craft." "My craft," Johnny said, standing up suddenly, his movement so abrupt that it caused the camera operators to quickly adjust their shots. "My craft has been the same throughout this entire ordeal. What changed wasn't my ability to disappear into a character or bring stories to life. What changed was the willingness of people in this industry to stand by someone when the going got tough." Sarah, clearly flustered but trying to maintain her professional demeanor, said, "Johnny, perhaps we could talk about your new film and how it represents a fresh chapter." Johnny turned to her with an expression that could have frozen fire. "Fresh chapter? Sarah, do you have any idea how condescending that sounds? As if my previous chapters were somehow tainted or invalid. As if decades of work could be erased by tabloid headlines and social media mob mentality." The tension in the studio was now palpable. Audience members were looking at each other uncertainly, unsure if they were witnessing a genuine meltdown or a masterful performance. The hosts exchanged quick glances, their years of live television experience being put to the ultimate test. Marcus made another attempt at diplomacy. "Johnny, I think what we're all trying to say is that we admire your resilience." Johnny whipped around to face him. "Resilience? That's what you call it when someone refuses to let lies define them. That's what you call it when someone continues to create art despite an entire industry turning their back based on allegations that were later proven false in court." The camera caught Jenna swallowing hard, clearly realizing that this interview had spiraled far beyond anything they had prepared for. "Johnny, we want to give you the platform to tell your story your way." "My way?" Johnny's voice rose slightly, though he maintained his composure. "Jenna, my way doesn't involve sitting here pretending that the past 6 years were just some minor speed bump in an otherwise smooth career trajectory. My way doesn't involve accepting the premise that I somehow needed to earn my way back into an industry that I helped build. Sarah made one last attempt to salvage the interview. What can you tell our viewers about working with your co-stars on this new project? Johnny stared at her for a long moment. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity before Jenna finally found her voice again, though it wavered slightly as she spoke. Johnny, I think we need to acknowledge that this conversation has taken a turn that none of us expected. Johnny remained standing, his posture rigid but controlled, like a coiled spring, ready to release at any moment. Expected? Jenna, what exactly did you expect? Did you think I would just sit here and smile while you and your colleagues danced around the elephant in the room? Did you think I would play along with this charade of rehabilitation when I never needed rehabilitating in the first place? Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair, glancing toward the production booth where frantic gestures were being exchanged between the producers and director. Johnny, maybe we should take a step back here. We're all professionals, we can work through this. Professionals, Johnny repeated, his voice dripping with disdain. Marcus, a professional would have done their research. A professional would understand the difference between accountability and character assassination. A professional wouldn't sit there and act like the past 6 years of my life were some kind of career hiccup that I needed to overcome. Sarah, her composure finally beginning to crack under the pressure, tried to interject. Johnny, we never said anything about career hiccups. We're simply trying to discuss your current projects. Johnny's eyes blazed as he turned his full attention to her. Current projects. Sarah, every single question you've asked has been framed around this narrative of redemption and return. You've positioned yourselves as benevolent hosts, graciously allowing the fallen star back into polite society. Do you not see how insulting that is? The camera operators were having a field day, capturing every micro-expression, every pause. The director in the booth was frantically signaling to Jenna, but she seemed paralyzed by the unfolding drama. Jenna made another attempt to regain control. Johnny, we absolutely respect your perspective, and if our questions have come across differently than intended, we apologize. Apologize. Johnny's laugh was bitter, echoing through the studio. Jenna, you're apologizing for the wrong thing. You should be apologizing for participating in a system that destroys people first and asks questions later. You should be apologizing for every interview you've done where you've perpetuated the myth that allegations equal guilt. Marcus stood up now too, perhaps thinking that matching Johnny's physical energy might help diffuse the situation. Look, Johnny, we're all on the same side here. We're all trying to make good television. Johnny's response was swift and cutting. Good television. Marcus, is that what you think this is about? Entertainment value? The destruction of someone's reputation and livelihood, reduced to good television? His voice grew more intense with each word. Do you have any idea what it's like to watch your life's work be dismissed because of headlines written by people who weren't in the room, who didn't know the facts, who cared more about clicks than truth? The studio audience was now visibly uncomfortable. Some people looking toward the exits, others pulling out their phones to record this unprecedented moment. The energy in the room had shifted from typical morning show cheerfulness to something much more raw and unpredictable. Sarah, perhaps realizing that their standard deflection tactics weren't working, decided to address the situation head-on. Johnny, you're absolutely right that the media coverage of your personal situation was intense and often unfair. Johnny stopped pacing and fixed her with a stare that could have melted steel. Intense and often unfair. Sarah, that's like saying the Titanic had a small leak. The media coverage wasn't intense and unfair. It was a coordinated character assassination campaign that cost me roles, friendships, and nearly my sanity. Jenna, clearly out of her depth, but still trying to maintain some semblance of host authority, said, Johnny, we want to give you the space to address these issues. Space. Johnny's voice cracked with emotion for the first time, revealing the pain beneath his anger. Jenna, I've been fighting for space to tell my side of the story for 6 years. 6 years of watching my career implode, while people who claimed to be friends suddenly became too busy to return phone calls. 6 years of watching my children read lies about their father in tabloids. Marcus made what would prove to be a crucial mistake, Johnny, but surely you understand that in today's climate, people have to be careful about who they associate with. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Johnny's entire demeanor changed, his face darkening with a fury that seemed to emanate from his very core. Careful about who they associate with. Marcus, are you suggesting that I was someone people needed to be careful about associating with? The realization of what he had said hit Marcus immediately, his face paling as he tried to backtrack. No, that's not what I meant. I was talking about the general climate, not you specifically, not me specifically. Johnny's voice was now dangerously quiet, the kind of quiet that precedes a storm. Marcus, you just said, on live television, that people needed to be careful about associating with me. You just validated every coward who abandoned ship when the waters got rough. Sarah tried to jump in to help her co-host, Johnny. I think what Marcus is trying to say is that the entertainment industry can be reactive to controversy. Johnny, Whirled on her, reactive to controversy. Sarah, they weren't reacting to controversy. They were reacting to lies. They were reacting to a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to destroy my reputation and my career. And apparently, based on Marcus's comment, it worked better than anyone could have imagined. Jenna, now clearly panicking as she realized the interview had become a complete disaster, made a desperate attempt to end the segment. Johnny, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back. No, Johnny interrupted, his voice cutting through her words like a knife. We're not taking a commercial break, Jenna. We're going to finish this conversation right here, right now. Your viewers tuned in expecting to see Johnny Depp, and by God, they're going to see exactly who Johnny Depp really is. The studio had become a pressure cooker, and everyone could feel it was about to explode. Jenna, her professional mask finally slipping completely, looked directly into the camera and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some technical difficulties and we'll be right back after these messages." But before the director could cut away, Johnny stepped directly in front of the main camera, his presence commanding and unmistakable. No technical difficulties here, folks, just a conversation that's finally getting honest. The camera operator, caught between conflicting instructions from the booth and the reality unfolding in front of him, kept rolling. Johnny looked directly into the lens, speaking to the millions of viewers at home with an intensity that was both captivating and unsettling. "You want to know what's really happening here?" Johnny asked the camera, ignoring the hosts completely now. "You're watching three people who invited me here under the pretense of discussing my art, my craft, my passion, and instead tried to turn this into some kind of public confession session for crimes I never committed." Sarah, realizing that they had completely lost control of their own show, stood up and moved toward Johnny. "Johnny, please, let's just sit down and have a civilized conversation." Johnny turned to her with a look that could have withered flowers. "Civilized? Sarah, there's nothing civilized about ambushing someone on live television. There's nothing civilized about perpetuating narratives that have already been disproven in a court of law. There's nothing civilized about making someone feel like they have to earn their way back into an industry they helped build." Marcus, still trying to recover from his earlier blunder, approached from the other side. "Johnny, we never intended for this to become confrontational." "Intentions," Johnny said, shaking his head with disgust. "Marcus, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Every journalist who destroyed my reputation claimed good intentions. Every studio executive who canceled my projects claimed good intentions. Every friend who suddenly became too busy to return my calls claimed good intentions." Jenna, now desperate to salvage something from this disaster, tried a different approach. "Johnny, what would it take for us to start this conversation over? What would it take for us to get this right?" Johnny paused, and for a moment, it seemed like he might actually consider her offer. The studio fell silent as everyone waited to see if this could somehow be turned around. But when Johnny spoke again, his voice was filled with a finality that sent chills through everyone present. "Start over?" he asked quietly. "Jenna, you can't unring a bell, you can't unsay what's been said. Marcus can't take back his comment about people being careful about who they associate with. Sarah can't pretend she didn't frame every question around this narrative of my supposed fall from grace and miraculous return." The hosts exchanged desperate looks, realizing that they had pushed one of Hollywood's most unpredictable stars past his breaking point on live national television. Johnny continued, his voice growing more passionate with each word. "You want to know what would make this right? Acknowledging that innocent people were hurt by a rush to judgment. Acknowledging that due process matters, even in the court of public opinion. Acknowledging that destroying someone's career based on allegations that were later proven false is not justice. It's character assassination." Sarah made one final attempt to bring things back from the brink. "Johnny, we can absolutely have that conversation. We can talk about the importance of due process and the dangers of trial by media." Johnny's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Now you want to have that conversation? After you've already validated the very system that nearly destroyed me? After Marcus has already suggested that I was someone people needed to be careful about associating with? After you've all spent the first half of this interview treating me like some kind of reformed criminal who should be grateful for a second chance?" The camera caught every nuance of emotion crossing Johnny's face as he processed the full implications of what had just transpired. When he spoke again, his voice was deadly calm, which somehow made his words even more impactful. "You know what? The real tragedy is here," he asked, looking at each host in turn. "It's not that you ambushed me. It's not even that you participated in perpetuating false narratives. The real tragedy is that you probably genuinely believe you're the good guys here. You probably think you're being fair and balanced by giving me a platform to rehabilitate my image." Marcus tried one more time, his voice pleading now. "Johnny, we are trying to be fair. We want to hear your side of the story. My side of the story." Johnny's voice rose again, his composure finally beginning to crack completely. Marcus, my side of the story was told in a courtroom, under oath, with evidence and witnesses and cross-examination. My side of the story was validated by a jury of my peers who heard all the facts, not just the salacious headlines. He turned back to the camera, addressing the viewers directly again. But apparently, legal vindication isn't enough in the court of public opinion. Apparently, even when you win, you still have to grovel and apologize and prove that you deserve to exist in the same spaces you've always occupied. Jenna, her voice barely above a whisper, said, "Johnny, that's not what we're asking you to do." Johnny whipped around to face her. "Isn't it, Jenna? Every single question you've asked has been predicated on the assumption that I fell from grace, and am now somehow earning my way back. Every single comment has been framed around this idea that I should be grateful for this opportunity to rehabilitate my image." The intensity of his words seemed to echo through the studio, each syllable landing with the force of a physical blow. The audience sat in stunned silence, unsure whether they were witnessing the breakdown of a celebrity or the breakdown of a system that had failed him. "You want to know what I'm grateful for?" Johnny asked, his voice now trembling with emotion. "I'm grateful for the few people in this industry who never wavered in their support. I'm grateful for the audiences who continued to believe in my work even when the headlines were screaming otherwise. I'm grateful for the legal system that ultimately provided a forum for truth to prevail over sensationalism." Sarah, tears now visible in her eyes, tried one last time. "Johnny, we respect everything you've been through." Respect. Johnny's voice cracked with the weight of 6 years of suppressed anger and pain. "Sarah, if you respected what I've been through, you wouldn't have set this up as a redemption narrative. If you respected what I've been through, you would have asked me about my art." The silence that followed Johnny's last statement was deafening. The studio audience seemed frozen in their seats, unsure whether to applaud or remain silent. The hosts looked like they had been hit by a freight train, their carefully crafted morning show personas completely shattered by the raw honesty of the moment. Johnny began moving toward his chair, and for a split second it seemed like he might actually sit back down and continue the interview. But instead, he reached behind the chair and grabbed his jacket, the simple action speaking volumes about his intentions. "You know what the most disappointing part of all this is?" Johnny said, his voice now eerily calm as he slipped his arms into his jacket sleeves. "It's that I actually believed this might be different. I actually thought that maybe, just maybe, we could have a real conversation about art and creativity and the power of storytelling to heal and connect people." Jenna, her voice barely audible, tried one final time. "Johnny, it's not too late for that conversation." Johnny paused in his movements, looking at her with something that might have been pity. "Jenna, it was too late for that conversation the moment your first question framed my career as something that needed to be resurrected, rather than something that never actually died." The camera caught the defeated expressions on the hosts' faces as the full weight of their failure began to sink in. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, clearly realizing that his comment about people being careful about associations had been the catalyst that turned an uncomfortable interview into a complete disaster. "I've spent 6 years of my life fighting to clear my name," Johnny continued, straightening his jacket with deliberate precision. 6 years providing evidence, testimony, documentation, witnesses. 6 years watching the truth slowly emerge. While my career lay in ruins, and just when I thought that vindication might actually mean something, I walk into studios like this one and realize that the narrative hasn't changed at all. Sarah, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks, said, "Johnny, we never wanted this to happen." Johnny looked at her with an expression that was somehow both compassionate and devastatingly final. "Sarah, what you wanted doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what you did. What matters is that you perpetuated the very system that nearly destroyed an innocent man's life and then expected him to be grateful for the privilege of defending himself on your platform." The production booth had gone completely silent, the producers and directors apparently realizing that they were witnessing something unprecedented in television history. The decision had been made to let this play out, regardless of the consequences. Johnny walked over to where the hosts were sitting, his presence looming over them like a judgment they couldn't escape. "Do you understand what you've done here? Today, do you understand that millions of people are watching this and learning that even legal vindication isn't enough to restore someone's reputation? Do you understand that you've just taught an entire generation that accusations matter more than evidence?" Marcus, his voice shaking, managed to say, "Johnny, that wasn't our intention." "Your intentions are irrelevant," Johnny replied, his words cutting through the studio air like a blade. "The impact of your actions is what matters. And the impact of your actions today has been to demonstrate that the mob mentality is alive. And well, in American media." He turned back to the camera one final time, his gaze piercing through the lens and connecting directly with every viewer watching at home. "To everyone watching this, I want you to remember something. Truth matters. Evidence matters. Due process matters. Don't ever let anyone convince you that the loudest voice in the room is automatically the most credible one. Jenna made one last desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. "Johnny, please, we can do better. We can have the conversation you wanted to have." Johnny's smile was sad and knowing. "Jenna, the time for that conversation was 30 minutes ago, when you could have asked me about the collaborative process with my director, or the challenges of bringing complex characters to life, or what it feels like to lose yourself so completely in a role that you forget where the character ends and you begin." He began walking toward the edge of the set, each step measured and deliberate. "Instead, you chose to focus on scandal and redemption and whether or not I had sufficiently groveled for forgiveness for crimes I didn't commit. You chose sensationalism over substance, just like everyone else." The camera followed him as he reached the edge of the interview area, the bright studio lights creating dramatic shadows across his face. "You want to know what my upcoming projects represent? They represent the victory of art over politics, of creativity over corporate cowardice, of integrity over image management." Sarah called out from behind him, her voice breaking. "Johnny, please don't leave like this." He turned back one final time, his expression a mixture of disappointment and resolve. "Sarah, I'm not leaving like anything. I'm leaving because continuing this charade would be a disservice to everyone who has supported me through the darkest period of my life. I'm leaving because my time is too valuable to waste on people who have already made up their minds about who I am without ever bothering to learn who I actually am." The studio fell into complete silence as Johnny reached the exit, his hand on the door that would take him away from this disaster of an interview. When he spoke his final words, they carried the weight of 6 years of pain, struggle, and ultimate vindication. "To my fans, to the people who never stopped believing in me, to the artists who continue to choose truth over trends, this is for you. Keep creating, keep fighting for authenticity, and never let anyone convince you that your worth is determined by the opinions of people who don't know your story." With that, Johnny Depp walked through the door and disappeared from view, leaving behind a studio full of stunned silence and 3 hosts who would spend the rest of their careers trying to explain what had just happened. The camera held on the empty doorway for several long seconds before finally cutting to a commercial that no one would remember, ending one of the most explosive and unforgettable interviews in television history. The aftermath would be discussed, analyzed, and debated for months to come, but in that moment, all anyone could do was try to process what they had just witnessed. A man pushed to his absolute limit, finally deciding that his dignity was worth more than any platform, any interview, any chance at so